Both of them attacked me. Take a seat. Both of them attacked me. The culture of hip-hop is completely stunned. In a stunning FBI sting, Jim Jones, the famed Harlem man, was just taken into custody. What is the reason? A movie that was leaked, that no one saw coming, one that might potentially mark the end of his career and reveal his covert transactions. Social networking is booming right now. This startling incident's video is going viral. Fans want to know who leaked the audio, what Jim Jones was hiding, and why the FBI acted so quickly. This goes beyond a simple arrest. Jim may spend a considerable amount of time in prison as a result of this serious scandal. Insiders claim that this was a well-prepared takedown, an undercover operation that had been underway for some months. However, it's still unclear if Jim Jones was set up or if he genuinely operating a clandestine enterprise in secret. The industry is already in crisis mode, and celebrities are responding. Some are supporting Jim, while others are avoiding him, and the further you go into the narrative, the more bizarre it becomes. This is far from over, I assure you. Hold on tight. Let's examine Jim Jones's specific problems and how the FBI eventually apprehended him. Jim Jones has always had to balance his reputation that kept him in and out of the spotlight with his prominence in the music business. Not only was he a rapper, he was a hustler, a businessman, and someone who understood how to get along with influential people. However, it appears that he came dangerously close this time. This was no rap feud, industry rumor, or social media stunt. It was the FBI. The arrest of one of the most recognizable figures in hip-hop, Jim Jones, was the target of a well-publicized FBI sting that went viral. Furthermore, this was no ordinary arrest. The charges were grave. We are discussing financial crimes, conspiracies, and illicit activities. The fans were taken aback. What caused this? What actually took place in the background? More significantly, what was the following action taken by the Dipset icon? Rumors regarding Jim's involvement in a significant, confidential project have been going about for months. His loved ones began to notice changes. He made obscure, nonsensical maneuvers, talked with enigmatic friends, and abruptly became more cautious than before. Then a video appeared one day, a video that was never intended to be released. Jim Jones was captured on camera having in-depth, private chats with people who had long been under FBI suspicion in the dimly illuminated backstage of a posh club in New York. Rappers were not these people. These weren't executives in music. These individuals were involved in a significant clandestine activity. And in that muted discourse, a few phrases stuck out. Money transfers, coded conversations, and an agreement that needed to remain confidential. Fans initially didn't believe it. Is this a real thing? Jim Jones had established himself as a streetwise businessman who understood the game but lacked the recklessness to get involved in anything this risky. But then law enforcement confirmed it. This was no ordinary video leak. It was being used as proof by the FBI in an ongoing inquiry. Jim wasn't merely a spectator. He played a crucial role. Jim Jones has been under surveillance by federal authorities for some time. He was unaware that his phone was being tapped, that his every action was being monitored, and that some of his closest colleagues had turned against him, becoming informants. Every transaction and every dubious deal was being recorded. What exactly was Jim involved in then? A vast underground network connected to money laundering, illicit commercial ventures, and people already the subject of federal investigations, has been monitored by the FBI. Whether Jim Jones knew it or not, he had walked right into the fire, according to recently made public records. The release video was the last nail in the coffin for federal agents who had been waiting for the right opportunity to take him down. They had enough proof and were prepared to act. For Jim, that night began similarly to others. One of the city's most exclusive VIP lounges offers exclusive parties, opulence, and power moves. He had just finished a private function. It was meant to be a night of accomplishment, networking, and celebration. However, outdoors, that's where the FBI was. Standing by. For hours, black SUVs had been parked close to the club. According to witnesses, these weren't your typical police personnel. These were highly skilled federal officers who were prepared to attack as soon as Jim left. Then it took place. There were many people on the street, with lights flashing and sirens. Armed agents surrounded the entrance and blocked all escape routes as Jim Jones went outside. Jim was shackled, restrained, and flung against a car before he could even respond. His security detail made an ineffective attempt to step in. The sting was federal. There was no way out. Onlookers and supporters were in disbelief. The cameras flashed. There were no phones. Videos of Jim's arrest went viral on social media in a matter of minutes. Jim Jones, one of the most well-known personalities in hip-hop, his wrists were cuffed as the FBI dragged him away. As many rushed to get answers, the internet crashed. Fans were perplexed and furious. This isn't possible. Bro, Jim didn't engage in any illegal activity. The headlines were obvious, yet he was set up. Jim Jones was arrested by the federal government for engaging in illegal business activities. One witness remembered Jim's last comments as he was forced into the FBI car as the commotion broke out. "Hey, this is ridiculous. Will you people actually complete this task at hand? It's not that I'm saying or doing nothing." It was too late. The car door slammed shut and Jim Jones was quickly taken away by federal officers. The icon of hip-hop's Dipset was now in FBI custody. The saddest part is that this was just the start. Jim sat quietly in the back of the black SUV, his firmly fastened behind his back at the wrists. As reality struck in, the icy steel of the cuffs pricked his skin. There was no miscommunication here. This cannot be fixed by making a few calls to the appropriate folks. The federal government was this, and they had a purpose when they relocated. Jim's thoughts were racing as the SUV rushed through the streets of New York. How did this occur? I didn't leave any evidence. I never gave too much away. I never put my confidence in the wrong hands. However, he had made a mistake somewhere. Now everyone on the planet was observing. They had already seized his phone. However, he was aware of what was going on online. His name was all over the place. Twitter was overrun with hashtags. Every frame of his arrest was examined by bloggers and analysts. Video. There may be no control over this, but his staff was in crisis mode, working feverishly to limit the damage. Agents were waiting as the SUV pulled into the heavily guarded federal facility. Jim was hauled roughly out when the door opened. His expensive jacket, which is now rumpled from the harsh handling, drooped over his shoulders. The cameras flashed, but Jim was emotionless. Long ago, he had discovered fear was a vulnerability. The intake procedure was quick. Fingerprints, photographs, and paperwork. The agents were efficient, unflappable, unfazed, and moved with icy professionalism. Jim was then led into a room for questioning. It was a cold, sterile, empty room that was meant to shatter even the hardest men. In the middle was a single metal table with 2 chairs on either side. Jim's expressionless face was deeply shadowed by the bright lights. He sat there by himself for a long time. Silence, no lawyer, no details. Jim reclined. He needed to reflect. This wouldn't be the last time he narrative. The door then opened. 2 FBI officers came in. Perfect outfits, unintelligible words. One, a sharp-eyed older man, sat opposite Jim and dropped a large file onto the table. The other person folded their arms and stood, observing. At last, the first agent said something. He opened the file and said, "James Jones, you're here for a reason." Jim said nothing. He was wise enough to avoid speaking without legal advice. The agent grinned, seemingly anticipating that answer. Next, he moved a picture across the table. Jim gazed down at the blurry picture. It was a still image from a dark backroom on a stolen tape. Jim was talking with folks who the FBI now called high-value criminal targets. Jim's mouth tightened. The agent went on, "We have you on tape. Furthermore, we have been observing you for months. Jim, you've been caught." The agent spoke calmly yet firmly as she leaned in. "How terrible do you want this to get? That is the only question. Every call comes to us. Each and every message and transaction." Jim leaned forward a little, his voice firm, his expression unflinching. "You have no idea what you're discussing." The agent shook his head and laughed. He moved another document across the screen and stated, "See, that's where you're wrong. Table. Someone in your inner circle, someone close to you, gave us everything." This is a statement from a witness. Jim maintained a neutral demeanor despite his racing heart. Someone lost it. He was sold out. Agent, "Look," Jim went on in a tone that was almost empathetic. "You know how this works. You're a smart guy. Do you really think your team can get you out of this? The evidence is overwhelming. Your best hope right now is to comply." Jim let out a deep breath, his thoughts racing. It took him some time to discover who had cheated on him and how far the feds had delved. However, one thing was evident. He was no longer the only focus of this. They must have dirt on other people if they had this much on him. His entire inner circle, his team, and his business associates. Additionally, the feds were pursuing larger targets. The door opened and Jim's thoughts jerked back. As is common in high-profile cases, Zai, his lawyer, came in, immaculately groomed and with a tense expression on his face. However, today, it was a slight relief to be there. Z's voice was forceful as she dropped a heavy folder on the table. "This is where we're done. My client is not answering any questions." With a sly smile, the agent closed his file. He stood, for the moment, leaning slightly in. "Jim, consider what we discussed. When the house of cards crashes, you don't want to be the last person left standing." Jim and his lawyer were alone when the door closed. Zai didn't spend any time. "Jim, this is awful. Very terrible. I require specifics, every transaction, every discussion, every name. You're going to run out of time if we don't take action right away." Jim let out a sharp sigh. "Someone snitched, but I'm not sure who it was." Z Wise's expression clouded. "After determining who it is, we devise a strategy to combat it." Jim recognized the truth, but he still nodded. Clearing his name wasn't the only goal here. It was a matter of survival. Betrayal was more than simply a legal issue in his world. The penalty was death. In the interrogation room, Jim sat with his ears ringing from the lawyer's comments. "Jim, this is awful. Terrible." Although he had previously defeated lesser accusations, this was a federal case. This was enormous. Worst of all, someone he knew had lost it. Even more painful than the cold was that notion. A guard walked up to the cell, and Jim's eyes sprung wide. "You have a guest." Jim felt a knot in his stomach. His attorney had already departed. Who else might it be? They led him down a lengthy hallway to a room with glass partitions. Conversely, Chrissy sat with her arms folded. Her face was unreadable. Jim's stomach twisted. Street battles, shootouts, and close calls with death. This shook him more than any of it. With a chill, Chrissy's gaze met his as she picked up the phone on her side of the glass. Through him, Jim raised his receiver after a beat. She interrupted him before he could say anything, her voice cutting and low. "What on earth is happening?" Jim let out a sigh. "It's not easy." Chrissy gave a snort. "Difficult. I see headlines when I wake up. You're behind glass and my phone is blowing up." "Jim, you got sucked into some heavy." Jim gave his temples a rub. "I didn't follow their instructions." She squinted. "Next, Jim, tell me about the video. We all witnessed it. You're sitting there discussing conducting business and shifting weight with some unscrupulous folks. How on earth were you thinking that?" Jim's jaw tightened. He had watched the video. It appeared awful. He said, "It's not what it looks like," but even he found the words to be meaningless. Chrissy gave a headshake. "Jim, are you even aware of the gravity of this situation? You were charged with federal offenses. Good men don't simply ignore them." They both knew she was right, and Jim said nothing. Beneath a calm exterior, Jim sat opposite the agent, his heart pounding. With a sly smile, the agent moved another document across the table. "See, you're mistaken there," he said. "Someone in your inner circle, someone close to you, gave us everything. This is a statement from a witness." Jim's heartbeat accelerated. He had been sold out by someone. However, who? The agent went on in a tone that was almost compassionate. "Jim, you're a smart guy. This is true federal time, and you are aware of how it operates. Do you think you can get out of this situation with your team? The proof is strong. Cooperation is your greatest bet." Jim let out a deep breath, his thoughts racing. He had to determine the full scope of the Fed's information and discover who had betrayed him. It was obvious. He was no longer the exclusive focus. They probably have dirt on his staff as well if they had this much on him. How about Jim Jones? Do they use him as a lure? The door sprang open before Jim had time to think about it. Gene Zaire, an accomplished lawyer with years of expertise in handling well-known cases, entered. A little relief came from his piercing look. He dropped a large folder upon the table without thinking. He proclaimed, "We're done here." The agent smiled as though he had anticipated this. "My client is refusing to answer any further questions," he said, for now, getting up from his chair and shutting the file. "But consider what we discussed. Jim, when the house of cards collapses, you don't want to be the last man remaining." The agent then left, leaving Jim and his attorney alone. The lawyer turned to him as the door closed, his voice intense and low. "This is horrible, Jim. Very terrible. I must know everything." Even to his own ears, the words in every talk and every contract sounded feeble. Chrissy gave a headshake. "Jim, are you even aware of the severity of this situation? This is not a case of little importance. You are facing federal accusations. People don't simply ignore this." Jim remained quiet. They both knew she was correct. Chrissy leaned forward and her voice grew softer. "I must know. Is this it? Is this the point at which everything breaks down?" Jim was at a loss for words. The guard intervened before he could reply. "It's time to go." Chrissy rose up and shook her head, letting out a breath. "At this moment, I am at a loss for words." Jim touched his ear to the phone. "Please, just keep it down for me." She gazed at him for a while. "I've been silent for years, Jim. Perhaps you should learn how to do the same." After hanging up, she turned to leave. Long after the line had died, Jim sat there with the phone still in his hand. For the first time in a long time, his world was falling apart, and he wasn't sure whether he could rebuild it.